within Africa, what I see personally is a collaborative space where we can create value across multiple different sectors and across multiple different countries. And what does that require? It requires each individual to play their part. And more so than that is also for us to be able to collaborate to make sure that we are maximizing the value that exists amongst us.
A lot of people founders here and a lot of developers here can attest that sometimes we build MVPs for even 4 months and 6 months, only to put it in the market and realize it's not going to work. People don't like it, it can't do anything. And then you have to build again for 6 months. Before you know it, that's 1 year.
The best gift you can give to a human being is a chance.
Yeah, exactly. A child that does not cry will die in the carrier.
There are too many problems in the world for us not to be the solutions to them. There are too many of us pointing fingers, looking for other people to solve for things that we know innately we have a piece of the puzzle for.
Think about the failures you've had in your life. Don't you learn more from failure than you do from success? I have.
Absolutely, that's where the biggest lessons are.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the show tonight. And in the morning, if you're in this PDT time, this is Michael Kimathi joining you from Impact Masters and Africa's Talking Retold podcasts. And today we have an amazing guest. Wonderful. At Impact Masters, we focus on the tech ecosystem by creating, sharing knowledge. We tell authentic stories, preserving history, embracing innovation, and most importantly, pointing out impact with actionable steps. Here, we are not just storytellers, we are disruptors of the status quo. This episode is part of Africa's Talking Retold podcasts, powered by Africa's Talking, an African communication platform and service. As a leading developer platform, Africa's Talking provides SMS, USSD, voice, mobile data, and airtime APIs, empowering developers across Africa to build sustainable and scalable businesses. We are amplifying voices that are shaping the future of business and technology across continent and beyond. Join us in this episode of the Impact Masters podcast, which is also featured on Africa's Talking Retold, as we sit down with UX veteran Nick Cawthon. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the second word very good. Founder of Gauge, design strategist and educator with over 2 decades of experience working with global brands like Adobe, Airbnb, and the Gates Foundation. Nick unpacks how AI is reshaping UX, why research methods matter more than ever, and what the future holds for designers and products teams. Expect compelling insight, practical advice, and perspectives that are challenging the status quo. And without further ado, I would like to add my guest today, Nick, one and only, joining me from San Francisco. This is quite amazing, man. I checked out your profile and it was super fascinating to see what you have achieved in the last 2 decades plus. And, beside what is searchable and it's on Google and AI, who is Nick and where did Nick begin? What is not online? What has formed the Nick that we'll be conversing with?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, Michael. It is a pleasure and a privilege. The origin story. Who is Nick? I feel like I'm making that up every day and trying to find some answer. But what I look back to is maybe some early days of being good at drawing, pen and paper as a little kid, and finding myself in a flow state early on of wanting to really express myself visually. And UI was, I was very fortunate enough to be here in the San Francisco Bay Area when the internet started to blossom. Apple Computer was in our backyard, Stanford and Yahoo and all of these early Google, all of these early tech companies were just down the road from us. And as somebody who was coming from the visual arts, I was fortunate enough to have the ability to merge visual arts with technology. and that became the first investment into the web for me in my early career. And now we're seeing these waves of change happen again and again with this introduction of AI and generative technologies, and trying to figure out how design and user experience plays a role in that as well. You're muted, Michael, but thank you for the courtesy. Yeah. Michael, you're muted.
Oh, I've been
There you
speaking
go.
all along.
That's right. I've been nodding. I've been listening, but I haven't been
I'm
hearing.
like, what's happening here? Yeah. So, given that we like to go all the way back, and also formulate these from the culture perspective and what really forms our decision in future, and having grown in the valley, you must have, seen the growth of Apple, the growth of all these tech companies that shape the tech world, and you might have even interacted with friends who are part of, the family of, whoever is building this. How was that for you? Did it shape the way you view the world? Did it shape the way, Nick, we know as a UI UX guru today?
Yeah. And this story is not one for the better. This story is one that is a cautionary tale. Tomorrow, I'm going to go to a baseball game, a sporting event, with somebody who has been laid off from Apple after 15 years. And when you put that amount of time into a company, and you now, again, as you reach the last stage of your career, have to try to figure out what the next stage looks like, that can be very anxious. That can be very concerning. And so the scale and the speed in which these companies operate can be extremely intimidating. If you are young in your career, I would absolutely recommend going and learning all you can, getting your hands dirty, and turn, 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 turn. But as you get more advanced in your career, sometimes that pace and that speed can be very intimidating. I often find that if you go work for a Google, you often always stay at enterprise scale companies. You go from a Google to a Meta to a Apple, and very rarely ever go off and try your own thing, because there's a comfort and a safety to working in a large company environment. However, we are in a area of disruption, and we want to be able to try and fail and try and fail. And it's hard to do that when you have a full-time job somewhere else. So I've been fortunate enough to always be on the fringes, to always use them as clients or consultancies, and be able to come in from the outside of these larger companies and see and perceive what's going on, and then make my adjustments accordingly. So yes, it is. It's fun to have that name, that recognition, and that visibility of where you work and what they do. But it also can be very difficult from a work-life balance perspective, as well as one of longevity.
Oh, wonderful. So, ideally, this means, there are all these different worlds. But for those who may not know your journey, and how you describe the intersection between anthropology, design strategy, UX that defines your work, how was it from founding Gauge to teaching future design leaders who actually are making, different decisions that actually determine the world of UI UX today?
Yeah, the programs that I teach in tend to focus towards mid-career people such as yourself, who are looking for that change, maybe are trapped in these environments and want to get out but don't quite know how to do so. And oftentimes their employer sponsors them for a different education degree, and they want to go to an MBA program and meet people like them and take an idea and start to run with it, see if they can receive venture funding in order to fuel that idea. So that's a natural match, where you have somebody who's wanting to disrupt their career and their life, and these venture ideas. And so I've loved engaging with them because gives me such inspiration and confidence to disrupt on my own. And again, the tool sets that they're learning and adapting are always very modern, very new. If you tend to work with the same people for a long amount of time, you're beholden to one another's aptitude. And so the more kind of people that you're introduced to and the ways of doing things and accomplishing things, the faster you yourself can learn as well.
And given the world that we are living in today is artificial intelligence and machine learning, and for sure from the Silicon Valley, one of the key things, Nick, is that machine learning and AI has been the world of research for the longest. What we're seeing right now is actually that research into play and into action, and this actually is determining all the fields that we work in tech and both in our day to day. So I would like to talk about AI and UX a bit. AI is accelerating design at a pace we have never seen before, as your word. But velocity without strategy can be dangerous. How do we make sure AI and UX is creating meaningful outcomes, not just faster outputs?
Yep. Meaningful, I think, is the key word that I want to focus in on. How do you ensure that it's meaningful? There's a phrase in English that's garbage in, garbage out. And if you don't have enough training data, if you do not cite the right sources, if you do not curate and edit the output, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. So any kind of shortcuts we think that a model or an algorithm might take, we need to be careful is that we are making sure that the output is something that is worthwhile. As it comes to user experience has to do a lot with human emotion. It has a lot to do with subjective opinions and feelings, not just the regurgitation of facts, not just the scanning of documents on the internet, but trying to understand and empathize with what your customers and your users are going through. And so that takes a lot of gathering of insights and processing of data and making sure you're doing the qualitative research required in order to generate the insights from the algorithm. If it's just a general request and there isn't that context of use or that understanding of the customer journey, how they go through the different stages of your product or service, there's not going to be a worthwhile output. Now, that being said, generative tools are great at transcription. They're great at recognizing different speakers. They're great at sentiment analysis and tone and taking large sets of data and distilling it down into some specific keywords or takeaways. But if you don't go that extra step and confirm it through one-on-one conversations with real users, it can be just too abstract of an ideation or of a thought to take it any further.
Wonderful. So in the world of AI today that we're living in, there's always the question of ethics. And one of those is that can I trust my tool to really give out what I'm desiring without compromising, the ethical values? What are these biggest ethical or trust challenges you see in AI-powered design right now? Because you see Figma and Adobe, or incorporating AI into it.
Yeah. From an ethical and trust standpoint, I mean, we saw this. I'll start with trust. About 10 years ago, the notion of cloud platforms, where you no longer had a file on your desktop, everything went to a cloud-based service. And it was years before we trusted it because sometimes the site would go down or the file would get corrupted or it wouldn't upload correctly. And there were those who never quite adopted cloud-based platforms or SaaS applications. They always wanted to have their files local whenever possible. And therefore, their growth was stunted. They weren't able to do anything other than the applications they were able to install, Microsoft Office Suite and so forth and et cetera. And I think the same thing is true with the trust of the output for some of these algorithms. The references, the correlations, the vertexes that the outputs are making may not be trustworthy unless you can have those kinds of attributions and reference to where are you getting these sources and how are you thinking of these ideas. So I think trust is a huge one. transparency as well. It's like, what is this costing, and how much impact does it have on things like the climate and the environment? And we're using these things without any kind of regard of its consumption patterns or the habits, because they're new and shiny tools, and they're awesome to play with, and they're fun, and they feel like they give you superpowers. And the last is ethical. We are a very polarized country in the United States, and we're seeing that there are different algorithms that spit out different viewpoints depending upon who or what trained them. And so it's this echo chamber again. We saw this with social media again 10 years ago, where that echo chamber can start to lead to more divisiveness because we all think we have that source of truth. We also should remember that humans trained these models. These were not things that magically appeared. There were groups of people that trained and improved these models, and they all had different ways of talking. They all had different viewpoints. They had different ideas of what associations meant, but we don't have any exposure to what that process was. We just only see the output at the luxury of convenience. And so those are three aspects to consider as you're adopting different generative tools into your workflow: is the trust that it's going to give you the right thing that's attributable to the sources that you provided it, whether it be those that you generated yourselves or those that it's crawling the web. The transparency of what this is going to cost me financially. We have a lot of ride sharing services that 10 years ago were very, very cheap. We got used to them, thing with delivery apps, and then once they gained market share, they increased their prices to the point where it wasn't sustainable. And the last is ethical, is that what kind of viewpoints are being skewed to either people of your demographic, people of your political viewpoints, or people of your race, and what was the difference between those who were training these models and those who are using them to help formulate their thoughts. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about there in how we think about and how we use AI.
Absolutely. And if you are advising a young UX designer, given your experience before AI, before these tools actually became a thing, there's a word where people used to use paint just to do some mock-up and wireframe. But now people just go in, write a few lines, and get some ideology around their UI UX, or mostly UX. So what is one AI skill or mindset they should adopt today to stay relevant?
Yep, specifically to designers, what I would recommend to them is to break from their design tools, because now you are going to have a product manager or an engineer that's going to be as good as generating UI as you are and twice as fast. Is to really try to adapt and understand how the relationship between those departments are best served, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes or offending one another, but to say, like, how can I A, not resist it, and B, augment it? I don't know if Figma is going to quite be the answer to that tool. It's hard to pivot like that as a company when you built the best drawing tool, UI drawing tool, and now have to completely reimagine the workflow involved with AI assisted design. I would almost start at the finish, is to get as smart as possible with front end code base, React applications, or whatever the flavor of your code is, and then work back from there. Understand design patterns and components well enough to begin to orchestrate and save that developer time. So rather than a handoff of here are my Figma files and good luck building it, is to say I can take the code that's already written and develop prototypes and UX walkthroughs from there. And then anything new can be submitted as a pull request rather than a design system change. So my advice was start at the finish. You have access to the code now, and you have these tools that can start to generate and formulate patterns at a level we've never seen before. And that's going to improve everybody's workflow down the road.
Wonderful. So how is AI impacting the UX research? Because there's a UX and there's a UX research, and design too specifically. And is there an opportunity that is underlying there that someone could look at and say, I want to take this path and impact this tool so that my UI UX actually stands out among my peers?
Yeah, when you ask about research is such a humanistic profession. It involves conversations like you and I are having. You may be using generative tools to create the questions. You may be scraping down all the podcasts that I've already done and asked ChatGPT, what are 5 questions I should ask this person based upon what you've detected? It seems a bit formulaic. So, yes, that's going to help you get from A to B. It's going to help you get to the end of the podcast. But where are your moments of pause to think that answer didn't sound quite right, or that emotion was something I want to go further into? Is to be able, as a researcher, to better listen what sounds like a standard Q&A and what really shows emotion and vulnerability, so that I can extract those insights from. Now, whether or not that's going to happen on this podcast, I'm not quite sure. But as a UX researcher, it's your job to be able to listen to what the real human emotion is. And yes, of course, you can use gendered tools to transcribe and transcode and index and all those things that I mentioned. But you're not going garbage in, garbage out. You're not going to get good responses unless you can really think about and reflect and opine on what it is that's being returned to you.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And by the way, of course, I had to really do a bit of research. And man, you have an outstanding content out there that you've put out. And I was like, what do I leave? What do I take? So it's just a matter of ensuring what actually cuts across. And one of the key things that I found fascinating, and I've always found fascinating, is like what Figma has done recently. They have launched in the less than 2 years. They have incorporated what is happening in the AI world. They have taken over the design and UX by all means. They have closed IPO. And I know these are people you look at and say, man, I think there is an opportunity. There is, opportunity created versus also the impact of the people who are using these tools to make sure that they are able to capture the essence of designers and the perspective of experience and upcoming designers. And I'm sure there are so many other companies that are doing design. Do you think maybe these other companies are missing the aspect of what is happening with the AI versus what has been happening in the UI UX over time? And if that's the case, what did Figma actually fuse from what has been happening over decades versus what is happening right now, and they've been able to capture that within 2 years?
I will agree with you on one point and I will disagree with you on another. The point that I'll agree with you on is Figma is the best tool out there. Again, it's been 18, 24 months, but even longer. I've been using it for maybe 3 or 4 years. And up until that point, every 18 to 24 months, there was a different design tool, from Balsamiq to Sketch to OmniGrapple to InVision to Exur. The list goes on and on and on. Every version and iteration led up to Figma. And Figma did wonderful up until the point where now you didn't need a design tool. Now you could go to Magic Patterns and type in something, and whoop, all of a sudden your UI was there. You didn't need to draw boxes and arrows and change different variation states anymore. That was already done. We, as a design community, spent 10 years creating systems patterns, pattern libraries, systems design, in that we were able to train algorithms. Here's what a button row looks like. Here's what a tab set looks like. Here's what a drop down looks like. And those models were used to train algorithms for which we're generating UI. So we provided it the fuel for this fire. And I know Figma has extensions that will try to get it into generative tools, but it's not baked yet. It's not fully attributable. You can't set rules and guidelines, and it can't go in 2 directions. And so, again, they're going to be climbing an uphill battle to reimagine themselves, to cut off the billions of dollars in existing user licenses from people who still want to draw boxes and arrows, and go to something that's more of an integrated development environment that can use design systems and pattern libraries and create concepts either on the fly or on a component basis. That Figma's prototyping abilities are horrible. There's no passing of variables. There's no key commands or strokes. It is a glorified image map, just like InVision was, where you click and there's a hot zone and then it loads a new page. There's no error handling or states or validation happening. Those are how we use the internet, not how we click through storyboards. And so again, a large part of my offering is making sure there's UX that's testable in front of actual users using actual data, and Figma is miles away from that. So I agree with you is that what it does is very, very good. It's like a musician who is at the top of his craft, but in a very specific genre. Don't ask them to play jazz or classical because they're good at that one type of music. And Figma is excellent at being a design tool for UI. But the field has evolved so much that I don't know if they're going to catch up.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting perspective you brought. And as a creative, I know there's a part where copy what exists, and once you saturate them, you get to the apex of that, then you can start recreating. Do you think they're really following that pattern where at some point now they saturate and they can provide more, and now they talk to gurus like you and incorporate that part of how do you prototype the idea? How do you originate the idea from the perspective of, me as Nick and Michael here? We can actually design the same system, but always come out with a different outcome given our experiences and how we view the world. Uh, because from what you described is that, yes, they have captured everything that has ever existed, but they have missed the point of why did it exist. Do you see a world where that comes to it, or maybe that will be the next innovation in this realm of UI?
That'll be the next version of Figma. Whomever replaces them, Figma will do fantastic. Think of Adobe Photoshop. They've been around forever. They were the first design tool I picked up when I was 15. I went to the computer lab at my secondary school, my high school. I had a floppy disk, one of the hard ones, 1.4 megabytes, I believe. And I copied Adobe Photoshop 1.5 and I took it home and I learned how to use it. There was no sort of software code or serial number. You could just copy an application and then put it on another computer and it would work back then. And Adobe's still around and Photoshop's still around and they're still doing it for raster-based graphics. And they've been trying to adopt AI, but now do we even need to edit images manually, or do we just tell Midjourney to remove this skyline in the background or this plant over my shoulder and it's gone? Why would we scrub these out manually when we can just now tell the algorithm to do the same process for us? And so I see Figma in that same sort of conflict of the way of thinking about accomplishing a task has changed so much that the tool isn't going to be able to keep up with the times.
Yeah. So do you see a world where if I'm a young designer and I've played around with all these AI tools to fast track my journey, and I feel like, wait a minute, there are people like Nick who have spent 2 decades in this, and they build this journey to be expert who they are. And of course, there's a storyline, there's step by step hard work that has been put in place. For me, I'll be interested to really talk to this person who wants to really go the hard way, and possibly if they're able to incorporate, what is happening in the world of AI and machine learning, well and good. But there is some of research methodology, as you have done a huge work around it, that really work for you. Would you like to talk more about this research methodology and the journey to get you to be a really good UI UX researcher?
Yeah, for any young designers out there, either in Africa or beyond, there's a concern is that we're all going to lose their jobs, and we don't need the junior designers to do all of the tedious erasing of plants and skylines. We don't need those anymore. We can just type it in, and we've taken out your purpose and meaning. Here's the optimistic approach, is that these tools are less than 3 years old. Nobody has used them before. And when you take old guys like me and young people like you and you put them into a learning environment, the younger are going to be better adept to learn tools faster and be more proficient and more innovative with them than somebody like me who has been sort of slugging along the whole way. And so again, we have just come into this time of disruption and transformation. And what better to be than a young, curious individual that can make themselves faster than those above them, than those at a higher level of seniority, because nobody's used these tools before. And you're the ones that are going to change the industry, not me. So instead of trying to climb the corporate ladder, generative tools have given you this jetpack where you can build anything you want on your own. Now you can be a developer, and a good one, with a very small bit of knowledge. And so, again, the point of advice, which is free, by the way,
Yeah.
is to look at where else can you apply your design, your UX, your mode of thinking, and how do you actualize things rather than try to go into some sort of era of production, which is might would have where you would have been before. So, yeah, the junior designers, again, you're going to be faster and better, and
Yeah.
nobody's used these tools before. So, good luck and go get them.
Yeah. Nick, I know in the design and creative world, people make mistakes and errors all the time. You think your design is like this one when I present it to these guys or the team, they'll be like, fantastic, the best design ever. But of course, there's that moment where you get like, man, like Steve Jobs used to say, this is the the XYZ design I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Uh, how do you take that? Because also creative work is like your baby. You put in work, blood, and sweat. And even today, even with AI or whatever, there's always that creative aspect of it. You can't actually rule that out because if you are creative, you are creative. You're not, you're not. So these
Yeah.
other tools just accelerate it, as you're saying it. So how do you handle that moment? And how do you learn from that and ensure you grow?
Yeah. Good design is not subjective, where it's you think this and I think that. A good design is objective, where we've tested it. It's the difference between UI and UX. A UI is like a piece of art on the wall. Wow, wow, that's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's so simple. But objective is let's put it in front of a user. Let's put a prototype of it in front of the user and see how it tests. Do they know where they are? Do they know where they're going? Do they know what to do? And that's user experience. That's the difference between UI and UX. And so we, as sort of unbiased designers, we let the user tell us what's good and what's not. And the more accurate and the faster we can get to that point of testing, the better our workflow will be in development.
And have you ever changed, an executive mind by your design by just making sure that the story is right? Because yeah, you might have a great UX UI, but how you present it actually changes the perspective. Have you ever been in that world?
Yes, and vice versa. I've had an executive change my mind, where I have thought that maybe, again, as designers, we want to take information away. We want to make things as clean and as clear as possible. And sometimes the things that we take away are actually the most essential. And so looking at an executive who might have a better understanding of the context of use than, say, I would, to say, no, these are very important elements. They shouldn't be hidden. They should be brought to the forefront. And so, yeah, a good relationship with an executive or a product manager goes both ways, where we not only suggest how we can streamline design or visual elements, but we also listen to say, okay, these are some workflows and some points of feedback that are crucial so that nobody's searching for the crucial information at any given step.
Wonderful. And when I was doing the research about you, you have introduced the idea of thinglessness, designing for the experience, not the artifact. Can you please unpack that for us?
Sure. Like there's a book by Cheryl Platts of you're not designing for a screen or a device. You're designing for a service or an experience, and there may be a screen or a medium that encapsulates this experience, but it's really how you're trying to push somebody through from A to B. And that's the idea of not locking yourself into, again, a specific resolution or frame, but to make it universal, the way somebody feels as they interact with it.
Thank you so much for really breaking that down very clearly. There's this analogy where people, and here we're changing gear a bit, where people are starting to think that designers are starting to take the product, manager or product designers, products, more product managers role. Do you agree? And what do you think this actually has really been a resort where people feel like if I'm a product manager and here is a designer, I feel like they are doing more of what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Oftentimes, I get product managers that think they can be designers, and probably vice versa, designers that think they can be product managers.
Mm.
And again, now we are playing in each other's sandbox. We have hands on each other's tools. I could create a product requirements document very easily by typing into a generative tool, giving it a couple screen grabs, talking about user needs, and then it would generate some requirements pretty easily. And the opposite is true, where a product manager would be able to go in and take their PRD and put it in and ask for a UI that represents it. And so we are in this sort of tug of war of responsibility and output. And so, again, as user experience practitioners, one of the things that we're supposed to pay attention to is emotion and feeling and frustration and anger and progress and joy and delight and all the things that come along with processing information on the web. And that's going to be where we add value, is try to put ourselves in the context and in the voice of the user, so that when we talk to the product manager, who may be the context and the voice of the business or the executive and responsible for the implementation and the timeline and the budget and the sequencing and the phasing, that's where they should be focusing on. But then our voice has to be one of advocacy for the end user.
Wonderful. Let me introduce now another element in that question, who is engineering. So there's product manager, designers, and engineers. And for the longest, you find there are companies that are not a bit hesitant to really provide the same, quality product designers and product managers as they could provide for engineers, or they think this is better than this. Is there a world where you see this actually being addressed and really taking the next frontier of products that we see in the market, where all these three arms of the product work together and find value in each other?
Yeah, the engineer is the third hub in that spoke, third spoke in that hub, where we're all playing together. And again, I, as a designer or user experience practitioner, created apps in the last 6 months that would have taken me years, because I've had the ability to fake as an engineer, to vibe code, as they call it. But I don't have the ability to understand what that means at a scale yet, where if this were to go live and this were to become real, how this starts to break down, how it starts to scale effectively or not. And so I think when the UX practitioner talks about the voice of the user, the engineer is the reality check to ensure that it's something that's achievable within the budget and the timeline that the PM has dictated. And so those are always the tug of war. But again, we're all going to be working in the same tools and have overlap in our responsibilities. And so it's going to be interesting to see where those roles start to fill in and what that starts to become. Because it's not as concrete as a handover anymore, where here you go, here's your deliverable. Because if we're all generating from the same code base, whether it be prototypes or PRDs or deliverable code, then we need to have some sense of right of way and priority.
And do you see also a world where this main aspect of the product being siloed as it is, and do you think some of availability of tools that people can collaborate in really can break that down, that silo down, and fast track the innovation as we need it? Because given that actually today as we speak, maybe Apple is releasing some of the product, and one of the discussion I've seen that these products have been the same for quite a bit, just a bit of improvement, and you can't really weigh that out because these are real people, real users giving this feedback. And you ask yourself, this is a company that hires the best designers. It has a history of doing the best design that we know today, hands down. So what might have gone wrong since they have the best talent in the house? Is it the silo, or is it? How can they hack it?
Yep. That tends to be at the executive level or at the product level. The designers can only design what's in front of them, and if they don't have clarity of where this product is headed, then it doesn't matter if they're the best designers, they're on the wrong team or playing the wrong sport.
Mm,
And so, yeah, the sum is greater than the individual parts.
yeah.
And, you know, does the company have a mission or a purpose that the designers can all get behind? Is there consistency in management towards how they design? Is there a pattern library or system design system in place for which that they can achieve these things well? Have the developers taken the fidelity of the design and made sure that it's something that's achievable? Because again, design is an abstraction of an idea, of a concept. The development is what's responsible for implementing it to reality.
Mm.
And so it's just as it's possible to over engineer something, it's possible to over design something. And so I always want to find that fine balance between the two.
Dick, you have mentioned something very important about the executive, and I think these are reality in so many companies. With your experience, how do you solve that problem? Because an executive is juggling about 50,000 things, one of them
Yeah.
being the investors. How do they make extra dollars? So some of these
Yeah.
nitty-gritties are forgotten in that cloud of things. How do you help such executive really navigate that water?
Yeah. You be transparent in your work, to be transparent in your process of how you go about a requirement to a product, where you see that variability and that evolution occurring. Um, because as you mentioned, the executives are focused on other things, keeping the company running or hiring or raising money. And that the more it, we've used the word democratized, where you're democratizing your design process, you're bringing other people into it. You see yourself not as a contributor, but a facilitator, where now you're facilitating conversations around what do you think? What do you think? Where can that change be made? And you don't attach yourself to the deliverable to say this is my design and I'm putting it on the wall, but instead it's you're almost like a note taker, and you're facilitating expansion and conversation around it. And so that's how I deal with executives. I make sure that everything's very public, everything's very involving, and that there is no personal feelings or subjective opinions attached to any one output.
Wonderful. Throughout this conversation, one thing I've gotten is that for you to be a great designer, you have to be a great listener most of the time. And creative are always like, I want to share the next big thing, man. I learned this new stuff. I want to show it. How do you balance that and become a great listener and someone who understands what is required by my client, what is required by my users, and what is
Yeah.
required by the person who's paying for this service?
Yeah, it requires you to be both an introvert and an extrovert. Introversion meaning you have to spend the time pushing the pixels and putting the output together and doing the visuals. And the
Mm.
extrovert is that you have to spend your time getting in front of people and doing that listening skill that you mentioned. That's a very different type of behavior. Somebody that's gone in and really sort of been meticulous about the craft and the deliverable, as well as somebody that understands the methods needed in order to generate the requirements that will make the deliverable a success. So putting yourself into two mindsets, and some may be more challenging for others. If you are a people person and very hyperactive and you like to work a room and have a number of different conversations, maybe slowing down and focusing is going to be hard for you to do because you're so stimulated by personas. And the
Mm.
opposite may be true, where you're an introvert, you want to close the door, put on some music, and really start to craft that deliverable. Well, if you're doing so in a vacuum, you can go off course very easily. And you want to make sure that you are listening and understanding to make sure that it's a success.
And in your experience, can this be learned or can it be experienced? Because there's some things
It
when we
will
say like
both,
you have to
both,
practice.
both.
Okay.
It will be learned and it will be experienced.
All right. Now the next segment actually is a bit of selfish kind of questions because there's
Sure.
this a thing that I'm building. I'm trying to set it up. Fusing in the United States of America and Africa, which I'm calling Space. And this Space actually, I wanted to really define the future of creatives, engineers, and entertainers. And there's a reason why I'm putting entertainers and creatives side by side. I know there's a world where they exist, both of them. And one of those is that I'm asking myself a very simple question. For the longest, uh, companies have been able to put all these three arms together, and where really they work hand in hand and they're able to collaborate, you have seen an amazing result. So hackerspace here is where these people could meet. The unlikely meetings that could have happened in a corporate or startup setup, but now they're happening in a space that is open and free and engaging. And one of those things is that, there's what is hyped. Today we speak about AI and machine learning. Tomorrow, maybe we might be speaking about robots. The next thing we're speaking about is IoT and so on and so forth. But without the clear solutions that really impact any person out of 7 billion, then it's just hype that, will be overtaken by time. People will make money for sure out of this. And some of people will, create solutions. So for me, when I think about this, there are a couple of things that I'm thinking about. One is the pipeline of the young talent, and there's this other world where people have mastered their heart, like Nick and Nick of the world. And the thinking is, could we have mentorship? Could we have workshop? Could we have trainings? And how do we transfuse this to really global standards where they could be consumed across the world? So, in your experience, how does model work for us to be able to really create such a space? And this could be even created within a company, to really nurture and develop this. From your experience, do you think this is something valuable that you would really be, invested in it in a perfect world? And if not, how would it be formed to really present the value for everyone involved?
Yeah, let me transcend the question directly and compliment you on organizing this type of space and this type of event. That's something that was very crucial to me early on in my career was event organization, where I would bring together at times 400 or 500 designers and have lectures and speakers and sharing sessions and demonstrations once a month. We would work with companies here in San Francisco and we would host them in that type of manner. Um, and it was important for us to network with one another. It was important for us to hear one another talk and present and have some community there. So the fact that you're doing that is great to hear. I think whatever you focus on will be a good outcome if that is your motivation is to bring together a community. Now, more specifically, I would organize it around topics. Is that if you have engineers, musicians, and designers, what are some topics that are ubiquitous towards all of them? I would love to go hear what design concepts a band or entertainer had about how they had to carry out their identity visually as well as acoustically. I would love to hear the engineering involved with an entertainer of crafting their sound. So there's overlap between our disciplines as creative professionals, and to find a series of topics that might address not just one designers, not just another one engineers, but addresses all three or some sort of rotation of content and some learning sessions involved.
Wonderful. And of course, for me, I've actually truncated these into three, phases. So phase number one is where you organize event, bring people together. I've done that for quite a while, specifically for developers. And I'm really curious to see the next phase, which is now once you meet, you're able to build something. What does it look like? Maybe a startup, maybe a company that consults. And for me, the question here would be in design specifically, what kind of skills do you think would really make sense to nurture this kind of phase so that they can be able to offer these services at a global scale?
Yeah, I'm going to a hackathon for the first time in 15 years next week, going down to Mountain View where Google's based and teaming up with an engineer. And I think you get 3 hours to create an application.
Yeah.
No, we're going to use vibe coding and generative tools, but it's going to be our first sort of let's see how we progress through this.
Yeah.
And so I think I love those kind of matchmaking where you take a designer and engineer and you smash them together for 3 hours and ask them to come up with something, and you have different teams of them. So those kinds of events or sponsorships are really great because there's an output, there's a thing there, um, and I do like that kind of sort of forced engagement with one another. And I'll let you know what we come up with next week. I'll let you know what our output might be.
Mm. Yeah, I totally really love to hear, and I've seen also these with AI. Now that there was a hackathon organized by OpenAI, I think 2 months ago or thereabout at the Moscone. I wanted to attend it, but I had to come back to Nairobi to do a couple of things. And also, this fuses back to what I do with Africa Stocking, where we are reaching like over 250,000 developers across Africa, which is
Yep.
not a small feat. When you look at that and imagine if at least 5 solution, 10 solution could come out of this, something big. Um, but by and large, is there like a UX strategy that really works when it comes to teams that want to scale, globally?
Well, you mentioned it. Listening is that the UX strategy is making sure that you're practicing user-centered design. Is that you're not falling in love with the button or the widget or the tool or the process, but you're falling in love with how the user helps guide that. Um, so yeah, that strategy will always work, and it's constant iteration and validation, making sure that the artifacts that you create are interactive and prototypes, and really something that can be tested quickly in front of real users. That strategy will always win versus what is perceived as a beautiful design. You want to have something that's actionable and good as a real product.
Yeah. So my last question, so that I can open this a bit and then conclude, would be around your experiences working with the titans of the world, such as Electronic Arts, Adobe, Airbnb, Visa, Intel, Gates Foundation. Which of these projects challenged your thinking the most, and what was
Yeah,
that? How did you navigate those waters?
yeah. Um, the one that was global, Electronic Arts, was a research project that looked at skateboarding. There's a game, Skate 3, I think, that came out or is coming out this fall, and they were doing positioning around how to appeal to different skate cultures in 7 different countries around the world. And this was during COVID, so travel was very hard. We had to find local resources that were able to execute this project. Um, and we were able to find these different subcultures and really understand the difference between a skate crew in Tokyo versus one in Paris, France. And then Electronic Arts was able to best position how they would start to sell electronic items to them. But that was a really engaging project because we were able to again map this out geographically and see these clusters of retail spaces as well as skate scenes, and then find ethnographers and photographers to go and document them, and the different changes of it, as well as the nature of skate retail, the difference between streetwear and skatewear and how those sort of ebbed and flowed from one another, was really an interesting research project.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nick. So I'm going to open this a bit. And towards closing, you always say, what is that one book that if you read the rest of your life, you could read it and it will make perfect sense and it could change the trajectory of your life? Or it could just be a proverb that really, changed, or you always remember it. I don't know if you're a Christian. I could ask, which verse of the Bible is that you could.
Yeah,
It's
I,
always that. Please go ahead.
it's specialization is for insects. I'm not sure which disciple said that, but specialization is for insects. Be always curious about that which is around you professionally in other fields, and always make yourself holistic rather than specialized. So yeah, that's my proverb. Stay
Wonderful.
curious.
Please. Oh, yeah, stay curious. So it's good. Sorry, allow me to indulge a bit, because there are two things that I've really learned while building communities, and one of them is how ants really build, because they always move in community, and the bees, and both are
Yes.
insects. So I can surely relate to that. So thank you so much, Nick, for making time. And I feel like we have just started this conversation. I think we can do another episode or a season where we actually go deep. At least now we're friends. Nick knows MK, MK knows Nick, and I love the school of thought that you have. You have like a portfolio of knowledge that you've shared. This could be impactful in the world, and for me, it's just to highlight the impact masters of the world, so that other people could learn from them and really engage. But thank you so much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, MK. Good luck to you.
Thank you for tuning in today's episode of Impact Masters Podcast, also brought to you by Africa's Talking Retold podcast. We hope these conversations spark ideas, challenged a perspective, and gave you actionable insight that you could implement in every day. And you don't take this for granted, but please subscribe in our channels. Share with your network. You never know who needs this information. And keep pushing the boundaries, because you could be the impact master we sit down with next. Because here at Impact Masters, we don't just talk. Impact, we make it happen. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
And within Africa, what I see personally is a collaborative space where we can create value across multiple different sectors and across multiple different countries. And what does that require? It requires each individual to play their part. And more so than that is also for us to be able to collaborate to make sure that we are maximizing the value that exists amongst us.
A lot of people founders here and a lot of developers here can attest that sometimes we build MVPs for even 4 months and 6 months, only to put it in the market and realize it's not going to work. People don't like it. It can't do anything. And then you have to build again for 6 months. Before you know it, that's 1 year.
The best gift you can give to a human being is a chance.
Yeah, exactly. A child that does not cry will die in the career.
There are too many problems in the world for us not to be the solutions to them. There are too many of us pointing fingers, looking for other people to solve for things that we know innately we have a piece of the puzzle for.
Think about the failures you've had in your life. Don't you learn more from failure than you do from success? I have.
Absolutely, that's where the biggest lessons are.
Yeah.